My name is Juliet Campbell, and I am the founder and I'm one of the directors of Oliverspring Consultancy. We set up about 3.5 years ago, and we set up primarily with the aim of reducing inequalities for people that experience dyslexia. Although we're based in Lewisham, we work across London, and we work in collaboration with other organisations. So we've got Achievability, which is in East London, Generate, which is in West London, and then we work with the Dyslexia Association of London. So if you would like to know more about the collaborative work that we're doing, feel free to give me a call. We've got this. On the back of there, it's got our contact details. But if you look inside of here, you'll see that we had something scheduled, Dyslexia Behind Bars scheduled, for 2 o'clock this afternoon. Unfortunately, the Cascade Foundation, who were meant to be doing that presentation, are not able to come as planned, which is a real shame because I've seen them present before and they are really good. But we do have another 2 events tomorrow. At 2 o'clock, we've got Assistive Technology for Dyslexia, which will be run by DNSys. That's an organisation. And at 5 o'clock, we'll have Melbourne, who will be doing a presentation on enabling children with dyslexia to succeed. So if you want to book onto any of those, you can. All I ask is that you book it through Eventbrite so that we can get an angle on the numbers of the people that come in. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to our speaker for this morning, Dr. David McLoughlin, and he's from the Independent Dyslexia Consultants. And he's left his very busy clinic this morning to come and talk to us all the way across London. So welcome, David.
Thank you. All the way across London. I only live just on the other side of the river, but made one of those bad decisions. You know, you look at the car and you think, public transport's probably going to be more relaxed. But it wasn't. I also have a sat-nav that, last time I used it, it spent the whole of an hour journey saying, still trying to find a satellite. You know, it's not much use. Okay. Right, just a little bit about me. I am an educational psychologist and I'm an occupational psychologist. I have been in practice for 40 years. And I was a child prodigy. But I started out in Australia as a generalist educational psychologist, and then I came to the United Kingdom, having been an immigrant child to Australia more than 30 years ago, and stayed. And I was doing my PhD up at Aston University, which used to be one of the centres for excellence for the study of dyslexia. There's an old test that people might have heard of called the Aston University. And I'm still in contact with one of those people, but that got me into the dyslexia world. And I was doing lots of assessment work, mainly with children. In the 80s, I was seeing 15-year-olds that I'd seen at 7 who were now thinking about careers and all those sorts of things. Do you want to do with some of those? And more adults are coming forward, so I kind of got interested in the adults. And in 1993, 2 things happened. One is I produced a book called The Adult Dyslexic, Assessment, Counselling and Training. And that was the first book to put dyslexia and adults in the title. And I also started a centre called the Adult Dyslexia Centre, where we were trying to provide a unique service for adults. No children's drawings on the walls, teaching that was designed for adults, not teaching that was for children but done with big people, and assessments that are designed for big people. And since then I've gone from, probably 10% of my work being with adults to 90% of my work being adults. I still see children to do diagnostic assessments, which is always fun. And I have a unique perspective on childhood dyslexia in that I come from the adult perspective. I look backwards rather than forwards. So the work that the recommendations I make for dyslexic children are often different from those that another educational psychologist might make. We changed our name about 15 years ago because there are increasing numbers of places calling themselves the Adult Dyslexia Centre, and we were being confused with other people. The idea of independent dyslexia consultants was to get across the idea of independence from other organisations, that we provide people with an independent opinion. We do regard ourselves as a sort of professional advocacy service. I do quite a lot of expert witness work at employment tribunals, language special needs tribunals, and those sorts of things. So, understanding dyslexia. You have a handout. Not everything that appears on the screen will be in the handout. I've just given you the basics to save you some writing. Okay. So I'm going to talk about transitions because it's very important that people understand the concept of transitions. I'm going to say something about the evidence for dyslexia. I'm going to give you the model that I operate on. It's based in the science. I'm going to say something about strategy development, the important issue of disclosure, and I'm going to say something about success. Right, life's transitions. Okay. I see people of all ages for an initial diagnostic assessment, from the 7-year-old that could talk the leg off an iron pot until they started school and were given this squiggly stuff called reading and spelling and maths. So suddenly they've kind of hit a wall. I see people who've gone from doing well at primary school to finding the demands of the secondary school very challenging. I see, this time of the year, I see loads of people who've got very good GCSE results and then they've bombed their AS level results because suddenly the demands on various things increase. I see people who've got as far as university before it's become an issue. I do a lot of work with the London Deanery that's responsible for the professional training of medics. So I see people who have failed their Royal College of Surgeons examinations for the 3rd time, and suddenly somebody says, do you think there might be an issue? It's all because suddenly the demands on the skills they need have increased. And my experience of dyslexic people is that whereas lots of us who are not dyslexic automatically develop the skills we need to deal with those transitions, my experience of dyslexic people is they don't, and we have to say, no, let's try doing it this way. The transitions in education are preschool, it's learning to read, write and deal with numbers. Primary school, by primary school children should be able to read so that they can learn. They should be able to read, and that's when the comprehension becomes more of an issue than the word recognition. Secondary schooling is all about organisation, learning to learn on your own. I talked to a mother yesterday whose son's been put on transfer. They're trying to move him out of the school, and it's mainly because of his organisation skills. He keeps getting detention for forgetting to go to detention. I don't know how many years detention he's going to owe by the time he's 16, but he might have to stay on the school for another year. And then secondary, higher, professional, working life, it's all about doing it all on your own. Once we've left school, there is this big transition from school to work. And then most of us have to undertake some sort of further training, some sort of further education. Job redefinition is a classic. It's a constantly changing and employment world, and people have been doing fine in a particular role, and then suddenly the role changes. In my experience dealing with adults in the workplace, change of personnel is a huge issue. It's not uncommon for me to say, so how long have you been with the organisation? 10 years. How long have things been difficult? 6 months. What happened 6 months ago? I got a new line manager. Okay? You've got a manager who's sort of fairly tolerant and will help you with proofreading and all those sorts of things. And then you get somebody that proofreads your work with a red pen and picks up on everything, and suddenly life's a nightmare. Interestingly enough, some of the dyslexic adults who become managers are the worst line managers because I suspect it's because they've been given a hard time for so long and they're sort of saying to people, you need to get your act together, I've done it, you can. Promotion. A lot of dyslexic people struggle because they have been successful. I mean, I know that sounds ironic, but they do. Suddenly the demands on all sorts of things increase. And it doesn't actually have to be within an organisation. I met a young man recently who never been formally identified. People have said you're dyslexic. A-levels, he'd done art and design. He'd done a degree in fashion design, and now he runs his own business with his wife. And they're going to develop the business. They're getting involved with some sort of equity company. So suddenly there are more meetings and there are more documents and all those sorts of things. So suddenly there are new challenges and change of job. I mean, the job for life is one that most people move from one job to another, one situation to another. They're there for all of us. We all have to face the transitions in life, but as I suggested, they are more galling for dyslexic people for a variety of reasons. Okay, so that says if we prepare ourselves for life's inevitables, we will not be perplexed by life's transitions. And I'm very keen with younger dyslexic people to make sure that they're developing the skills they need now and the skills they need later on. A lot of the provisions of dyslexic students deals with reading, writing and spelling, but it doesn't actually focus on things like comprehension, which is what people need for the next bit. So that preparation is really important, and acknowledging that it might be difficult is important. So, what is dyslexia? I'm a big fan of Professor Miles, who was one of the doyens of the dyslexia world. He was at Bangor University. He was around for years, and he was one of the first people to look at dyslexia in a systematic way. There is something called the Bangor Dyslexia Test, which is just a kind of screening device. It's outdated now. But you will know that every now and again some academic comes out and says, well, dyslexia really doesn't exist. There's a current furor going on at the moment. My comment was, so a bunch of academics are getting, child-focused and reading-focused academics are getting together for a junket. So what? There's a guy called Julian Elliott who's been writing books about it. But what they're really talking about is just reading, okay? But the media don't realise that, okay? So we'll have the Daily Express. They're coming out with a written document shortly, and we'll have the Express in the mail coming out with dyslexia doesn't exist. But these people are only focusing on literacy. Tim Miles said that dyslexia shows itself whenever symbolic material has to be identified and named. And there's a whole literature on, for example, dyslexia in music. And I've met very good musicians who are not very good at sight reading. Okay? So it could be reading, spelling, musical notation, a whole range of things. I haven't got it in, I'll talk about that later on. He also said there's no contradiction in saying that a person is dyslexic while being a competent reader. So you can be good at reading, accuracy, comprehension remains an issue, organising thoughts remain an issue. Most of the university students that I see can read well in terms of accuracy. What they can't do is read quickly and take the stuff on board at the same time, which is the more important skill at university level and professional life. Not many of us have to read aloud very often. Most of us have to read lots of stuff quickly and get the information. And he said that it's a syndrome, a family of lifelong manifestations that show themselves in many other ways than poor reading. So he was one of the first to be saying it's not just a reading and spelling problem, and I have huge sympathy with that idea because, again, if you take a lifespan perspective, many of the adults that I work with, yes, some of them have got huge problems with reading and spelling. But they have other issues that are affecting them in the workplace. Every time an academic says, well, dyslexia doesn't exist, I'd like them to meet the dyslexic scaffolder that I know who's been trying to learn to read for the last 20 years and still hasn't mastered it, and have them explain to him that it doesn't actually exist. I think they'd hide under the table. Okay. Am I talking too quickly? No? I do. If I'm running out of time, it gets even quicker. And if I say something that you need clarification of, don't wait till the end, okay? Yeah? And you're also allowed to contradict me, by the way. Right, so a little history. The concept of dyslexia has been around for about 100 years. People talk about Hinchwood and all these sorts of things. But the real thrust in the dyslexia world came in, or specific learning difficulties world, came in the 1960s with these people, Mr. and Mrs. Kirk, or Dr. and Dr. Kirk, who sort of conceptualized the whole thing. And it's still relevant today. Unfortunately, a lot of people have forgotten about it, and I don't want to make it too complicated for you, but one of the reasons we get in a mess over dyslexia is because people don't kind of know where to put things, okay? So people confuse things like visual stress with dyslexia. People confuse auditory processing with dyslexia, okay? And they're all relevant, but they're not really what I think most people in the field would now understand dyslexia as being. The simple model that they come up with was this. They said that between hearing or seeing and doing something, various processes occur. First of all, there are these perceptual processes, which they talked about as input difficulties. And we're talking about things like discrimination. If you can't hear the difference between a B and a D, then it's going to be hard for you to learn words that have got B's and D's in them. Okay, so, but it's not about dyslexia, it's a sort of perceptual process. So likewise with auditory processing, if you're not good at processing sound, then that's clearly going to have an impact. And visual stress, which is the current terminology for Erlen-Mears syndrome. Anyone wearing tinted glasses? No. Okay. Yeah, it used to be called Erlen-Mears syndrome. It's called scotopic sensitivity. It's a sensitivity to light source and intensity and colour and a whole range of things. And there is something in it, but it's one of those, new cure for dyslexia, wear coloured glasses and everything's sorted, okay? And it might have some impact on your reading skills, but it ain't going to make you better organised, okay? Then there are these sort of integration difficulties where the stuff that you've perceived, you put in some sort of order, sequencing, and that's about things like coordination and language disorders that you associate with things like Asperger's syndrome, where people are sort of very literal, and they're not very good at things like inferential questions in comprehensions and all those sorts of things. They can only respond to the factual ones, okay? And coordination, people still talk about dysgraphia and associate it with handwriting problems, and some people put it in the category of coordination. But actually, dysgraphia is about sequencing. It's about the signals between the brain and the page, okay? Now, what I'm going to talk about most is this bit, because I think a huge amount of the dyslexia literature, the science, is now about working memory, short-term memory, working memory, and I'll elaborate on that. Particularly something called phonological memory and naming ability, and as I said, I will explain what I'm all about. And then, because there are problems at these levels, you have output difficulties, which can be coordination, like dyspraxia, it can be specific language disorders, it can be literacy and numeracy, dyslexia, dyscalculia, all those sorts of things, okay? And the problem with a lot of the stuff at the moment is people, academic scientists, pursue one little bit and then they sort of talk about, well, this is why dyslexia occurs and so on, without putting it in the context of that grander schema. Okay? Does it make sense to you? Okay. So a lot of people, I get a lot of calls where people say, oh, I've heard about coloured glasses, okay? And I say, well, you can be sensitive to colour, and light source and light intensity, but you can have that and be dyslexic, and you can have it and not be dyslexic, and it's overdone, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Two little anecdotes about visual stress. Years ago, one of the first times I'd come across it, the originator of it was somebody called Helen Irwin, who was an American scientist, and she had a guy who was working out in Hong Kong that she trained, and it seemed that something like 50% of the student population in Hong Kong were wearing coloured glasses. I suspect it was being overdiagnosed. But I used to do some work at this little preparatory school, and there was a child came from Hong Kong, and he had coloured glasses. And there were some accompanying notes with it, which said it is a sensitivity to colour, so he needs to wear his glasses. It's also a sensitivity to light source and intensity. So this child, as well as wearing his coloured glasses, should read in a black felt-lined booth, illuminated by battery lighting, wearing a broad-brimmed black felt hat. And at the bottom of it, it said, this may of course cause him some social difficulty. I thought that was really perceptive. I remember the Senko at the school saying, I can just imagine going to my headmaster and saying, I need half a dozen black felt lined boots and so on. And an even better story that occurred very recently, I had a call from one of the police forces, the guy that trains firearms officers. And he said that I've got this girl who said that she's dyslexic. That was one who's training, and she's told us that she's dyslexic. But she seems to have trouble with black on white targets. Okay? So he said, we've tried things, we put it in a box and that was better. And we tried colouring it yellow, and I said, well, you know, it might be yellow, it might be blue, it might be green. Anyway, we sort of talked about it for a while, and I had established a kind of jokey rapport with this guy, and I said, well, if she gets through, you just have to make sure she doesn't go on outings where penguins, nuns, and zebras are involved. But yeah, those things do occur. So that's the kind of model that I'm operating on, and I think it does sort of clarify things. Okay. Good models of dyslexia, and there are loads of them, should do several things. First of all, they should explain all the difficulties that people experience, and a lot of the scientific literature on reading can explain reading difficulties, but it doesn't explain planning problems or organisational problems, or it doesn't deal with the broader thing.
For more information about Oliverspring, you can contact us on our website, which is www.oliverspringconsultancy.com, or info@oliverspringconsultancy.com.